Block. We've all heard of it, but what is it? Here at Jefferson, Block is the combination of a history and language arts class available for both sophomores and juniors. The combination enables the two teachers to align their curriculum and work together. But what are the benefits of this? And how is this brought into action? To answer these questions and more, we sat down with the four instructors of Block. I'm Emmy Palmersheim, and this is the Outlook's Block Talk. So thank you all for coming in to join me this morning. Who came up with the concept of Block?
From what I understand, my cooperating teacher when I student taught here 14 years ago, I guess, he and Tom Campbell and John Weld, as far as I know, were the first two to kind of put these together. At the time, when they initially did it, I do believe it wasn't even AP, it was humanities and U.S. history. Again, that idea of you put the human face on historical events was, I think, kind of the idea. And so from there, it just kind of grew.
And the sophomore block predated me too. It was something that the guy that I had student taught with had once done it, but he was not doing it while I was student teaching with him. And then when I was hired, former AP World History teacher Sean Neely was here, and they just kind of thought, put him back there and do that. And I think there had maybe the year before, there'd been a year with a former teacher named Kathy Noby had taught it. And so I think that's also why it was sort of still existing. Mm-hmm. There had been years where they had it, years that they didn't have it. I think they just happened to have it the year before I was hired, and it kind of worked out.
So in keeping with the curriculum of the courses you each have to teach, how do you make sure you're teaching the right material that's required for you to teach those courses while maintaining the togetherness that Block has, while keeping in the curriculum, but like with the other course?
I think that system was in place when I got in there, so I kind of just took over and ran, and then I mostly count on Ian, Mr. Peterson, to do that.
I think a lot of, at least in sophomore block, we're driven at least by the district curriculum, which sometimes exists and sometimes doesn't. And so it's essentially skill. I've always hidden behind the fact that the curriculum is about skills, and so as long as I do the skills that are required of a high quality LA class, that it sort of doesn't really matter what the content is. And so I've used that to teach Macbeth at times with feudalism, even though Macbeth isn't really anywhere in the sophomore curriculum. Things Fall Apart is probably my favorite thing to do with Block, and that is nowhere near sophomore curriculum. It's not taught anywhere else by sophomores in the district.
That really helps me.
But there's no better connection, I don't think, to sort of like a huge chunk of that. So I mean, to me, I guess it's just a matter of being creative and taking the liberties that I assume are there in the curriculum.
I'd say at the junior year, it seems to be with some of the literary choices that are made, it seems to run concurrent. I mean, we do kind of operate differently at times where we'll race ahead of each other, but that's basically it, and that seems to work pretty well.
Well, and also, kind of like what Ian was saying, it's skills based. So I have to work within sort of the expectations, obviously, that the College Board sets forth, as we all do, that the College Board puts forth in terms of what the students need to know to be successful on the test. And so, but they don't say how you have to get there. Okay. So while, for instance, with AP Lang, the class is about argument, but I can choose to look at argument and prepare you for the 3 essays that you have to write and the passages you have to read by looking at any kind of material. And so in our case, we just happen to choose material that is American history driven. And so from that standpoint, like, that's how I sort of pulled both ideas together, connecting to him, but also meeting the expectations of the College Board.
We are the only ones who do Block. Is that more so because it initiates here? Has it never been brought up to other schools? Do they have no interest in doing it? Do you know?
it's a scheduling nightmare, and I think our
Okay.
counselors and the people in charge of that are willing to do it. But I think
Okay.
it does create some schedule loops or hoops that people have to jump through. So we're committed to doing it, but it's not easy.
Oh.
And it's
So you
fighting,
can have-
it fights history too. I mean, not history as the subject, but history as
Right.
the way things have gone on, at least on the language arts side. The other, Kennedy and Washington and Jefferson, we all have our little quirks with how we put classes together, how we differentiate them. We tend to offer a pre-AP, and you know, we tend to sort of have these levels, for lack of a better word, that Kennedy doesn't. Washington levels in a different way. They offer AP Lang to sophomores, so it wouldn't work connecting back to world history. They offer AP Euro at both of those high schools that we don't, so that kind of eats into the AP World students that could. So it's harder to set up a club, you know, in the way that we've got it. So I think there's some traditional sort of things that have kept it in, and probably philosophies. Probably doesn't help that it's Jefferson that does it.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't help to get Washington or Kennedy to say that could be a good idea.
Just because they know that they're never going to reach that level anyway.
That's usually what they think.
So
Yes.
the try and
It's usually
fall down
Yeah.
hurts their feelings. I think.
Yeah.
You guys are in contact with your opposite block teacher a lot, yeah. I mean, how does that change the class more so than like a normal class where you're just relying on yourself to have to be in constant contact and rely on another person?
Well, this year, because Teresa and I are sharing the same room, and I'm usually not far from that room, I can hear what you guys are talking about. And a lot of times it'll knock things loose in my mind that you know, I didn't bring up or I need to build on for the next class period. And that's been really helpful. And plus, now that I see her every day, you know, in years past, she was upstairs, I was downstairs. We might go a week without talking, or see her in passing or whatever. And so this year, I think we're probably more coordinated than maybe we've ever been.
Sometimes I think I would find myself asking questions like, now have you talked about this with Mr. Rolbus yet? Like, I know he's going to be talking about it because we kind of know how our curriculums work, but sometimes if, we're busy or whatever in the past, we haven't been able to talk as much. But yeah, this year we've had a unique opportunity to be able to kind of check in.
Do you think it's beneficial for kids to take block? I mean, you guys have taught it, all of you, for a couple or many years now. There's obviously a reason you stay, because, I mean, why? Why do you teach it? Do you think it's helpful for the kids? Is it helpful for you?
I think
Hope so.
the kids that come back still from the first year I taught it are kids that come back from when Mr. Neely was teaching it and still remember it as I mean, this is sophomore year for me and junior for you guys, still remember it as that part of high school that they most cherish. Tells me that it's extremely worthwhile, but it also forms it shapes a high school experience to an extent, I think, for students in a way that other classes might not. And I'm not sure what the magic of it is, but
It's
it
a
really
community.
seems to
It's a
have that.
flush- it's
a
the
community.
creation of a community. Yeah.
It is, and I
Shared
know,
experiences.
Chris, last year, I mean, we had all those added days at the end of the year, and we were able to culminate our year in the band room, analyzing The Great Gatsby, like from the literature point of view, but also the historical point of view, and it was an awesome experience. You know, it was really cool. But like part of the reason why it worked is because we had built that community over the course of the year, and I think that that's a key part. But I also think instructionally, not connected to the rigor piece, but also like we are making a conscious effort. Maybe we don't meet like daily or weekly or whatever the case may be, but we are making a connection to align our curriculums so that there is a connection. If you're not in the block, there is a connection, but we're very consciously making that connection. And I think that impacts learning. That when you have people who are always saying, hey, how does this connect? Like, could you connect in a blog post or something you're talking about in language arts? Like, when you are constantly being asked to make those connections, it develops a critical point of view. It helps with analysis, and that's really, I think, something that students are able to take as they move into college,
Right. It
into
also-
their senior year.
While we do it consciously and formally as often as we can, it also puts it subconsciously into the students' brains.
Right.
Sure.
And I think that you know, and where subconsciously you see the classes as linked in a way that I'm not sure my U.S. humanities students always see their U.S. history classes linked, even though because they'd be left to make many of those connections just on their own, and to no fault of their own, it's just not as easy to make those connections. Going block like that word forces it into into a student's head.
Reinforcing skills and content at the same time.
Exactly.
If you had a kid, maybe for you to a freshman, for you to a sophomore, who was considering taking block and wanted to know what you had to say about it, if you could advise them to or warn them not to, what would you tell them?
I think one thing that's important is you have to have the habits in mind. You have to at times set aside the things that a lot of times some high school kids will do to take up time to do whatever, and you have to be able to set those aside and focus on what's important at the time. Other than that, just be open-minded and willing to try something new, and that's going to hopefully help wake you up intellectually.
I think it would depend on my kid. I'm just thinking like, there's not a universal that says block is perfect and great for everybody. That's just not a truth. It's just saying like not taking it isn't right for everybody. I've got some kids right now who I would love to have challenged in AP, who I would really wish there was a way to move them up to that next level and have them do those things. But that Chris mentioned habits of mind, which is a perfect way to put it. They don't have that habit of mind to say that that's really where they want to be academically. I think every kid's going to be different. I think it has great benefits for the students who are prepared for it and willing to embrace the challenge and the block as a thing. And the other way, it could be a year of complete misery if they're not in that position to jump in there and do it. So we see both every year, I think. Kids who are really ready and kids who come along and kids who've got it on that first day, and then we see kids who, by the time we get to the end of the year, Ian and I look at each other and just like high-fiving at the fact that that they pulled it through, and then at the end of the year became like this just a different student by the time we get there. So.
Is there anything else any of you would like to add?
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Right.